Today I get to do one of my favorite things, which is compare two things to each other. More specifically, an Alienware versus a ROG in Dawid's Deathmatch Arena of Death. However, before we get into it, it's time for a quick word from today's video sponsor. Today's video is sponsored by Be Quiet and their Lightwing RGB fans. Now I can talk for ages about their high quality construction, powerful and quiet airflow, and how beautifully diffused their RGB is. But the most important thing you need to know about the Be Quiet Lightwings is that they don't use some stupid proprietary RGB connector. They just use the stupid standard one, which is way better. So if you're interested in some sexy Be Quiet Lightwing fans, check the link in the description below. Thanks again Be Quiet for sponsoring today's video. I occasionally get comments along the lines of, Dawid, you are a little bit too sarcastic, and that makes it difficult for me to figure out if the thing you're talking about is good or not. Now obviously, it's never nearly as polite as that. There's usually a concerning amount of swearing involved for some reason. But I got you, random foul-mouthed stranger. What I'm going to do to make it easier for you to understand is introduce a numerical scoring system to this video. How it's going to work is in each of the categories where I compare these two devices, I will either reward or remove points depending on its performance, so that at the end of the video, we can just tally up the scores and the device with the bigger number next to it is the winner. And considering that numbers can never be sarcastic, hopefully that makes it easier for you to understand. So with that, let's get into the first category. Now in terms of build quality, the laptop is actually pretty good for the price point. You have this metal lid on the top and the plastics used in the rest of the construction is relatively solid. There's even a little bit of soft touch rubber involved, which I really like. So let's give it a nice unambiguous 1 point for that. Whereas the only thing that you need to know about the build quality of the Alienware, aside from the fact that it's basically just the inside of a Dell XPS with a frankly obscene amount of plastic crap glued to the outside of it, every time you close the side panel, it makes this sound. You hear that ringing in there? That's -1. This is quite a complicated category and I don't quite know how I feel about it. Because on the one hand, the Asus Strix is quite upgradable for a gaming laptop, barring one major problem, which is the fact that it doesn't have an upgrade glory hole, and it means that every time that you want to get access to the internals of the laptop, you have to go through a process that feels a lot like keying your own car. However, once you're inside, it's quite upgradable, you know? The RAM isn't soldered to the motherboard, you've got an additional M.2 slot for a bunch of storage upgrade options, and the battery is removable. But it's still a gaming laptop, which means that both the CPU and the GPU are soldered to the motherboard, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff that you can't upgrade. Whereas the Alienware over there is objectively a lot more upgradable than the Strix. It's got a socketed CPU, so you can upgrade that, you can change out the graphics card, it's got a whole bunch of hard drive cages all over the place, so you can put a whole lot more storage in there. But it's only more upgradable because it's being compared to a laptop, and upgradability is one of the form factor's main advantages. Compared to other desktops, it's not very upgradable. They have a proprietary shaped motherboard and power supply in there, which actively hinders the upgradability of that device. So it feels weird to me rewarding the Alienware for upgradability when its design team made deliberate choices to limit its upgradability. So because of that, I'm gonna call it a draw and just award 0 points to both of them. I think that makes the most sense. The all-important is it possessed by Alma category. Now, if you're new to the channel and you don't know what this means, basically Alma is a terrifying character from the Fear franchise that seems to have taken up a part-time job possessing gaming systems. Her preferred prey seems to be OEM systems, specifically Acer or Dell-based ones for some reason. Now, symptoms of an Alma possession include random hardware or software-based instability that doesn't seem to have any diagnosable root cause, And after not a very long time using this Alienware system, this definitely has some hella Alma juju in it. When I first fired up the Alienware to redo the benchmarks for this video, it booted fine. But I realized that I still had the upgraded RAM configuration in here, which I didn't want to initially benchmark. I wanted to test the single 8 gig stick that came with the system. So I changed the RAM out, the system fired up perfectly fine, except that the RAM was auto set to 2666 MHz, which is really weird. When I was initially testing it, it auto set to 3200 MHz every time, but now it was running at 2666 MHz. But anyway, easy fix, go into the BIOS, manually set the speed and restart it. At which point the PC just refused to boot again. I couldn't get it to boot for like 2 hours. The first thing that I thought was maybe I set it to the incorrect RAM speed, so I just restarted the PC several times so that the BIOS would realize there's something wrong. But the PC didn't seem to realize there was anything wrong because it would go through its normal like boot procedure with the fans ramping up and down and whatever, but I would just get zero signal out of it. So I thought, okay, maybe there's something wrong with the RAM, changed back the RAM that worked before, it still wouldn't give me a signal out. And then I got a bit worried. So I started changing out random hardware bits, checking thermal paste applications and a whole bunch of stuff. Nothing worked. Like I said, like 2 hours of changing things, I couldn't get the system to give me a signal out. At which point I decided to reset the CMOS, which fixed it. The PC booted straight up, everything was fine, except I realized that I had the two 8 gig sticks in as opposed to the stock RAM configuration. So I turned the system back off, switched the original RAM back in, and then it refused to boot again. So I reset the CMOS again, which made it work. It booted again after the second CMOS reset, but the RAM was still running at 2666 MHz. So I went back into the BIOS to reset it to 3200 MHz, which borked it again, and then I reset the CMOS, at which point the system booted, the RAM was running at 3200 MHz, like nothing was wrong, everything was just working now. Which is really irritating, and I am still highly frustrated at the system because, like I said, it's essentially gaslighting you at this point. So I have not forgiven it for it, and because of that, I am giving it minus 200 points for its Alma possession. Now, in terms of the Asus laptop, I also did a whole bunch of hardware changes and upgrades and stuff in that video. Never had any kind of stability issues with it. The only problem that I had with it in terms of software acting up is I had to uninstall McAfee like 3 times. McAfee is weirdly persistent and it's very annoying. It gives you several pop-ups an hour. Like, I hate McAfee. That was the only problem. Other than that though, the system was perfectly fine. So I guess I'll give it 0 because of McAfee. Both of the devices did pretty well in this category. They did both have the standard company branded terrible software pre-installed, but only one of them had additional bloatware installed on top of that. And that was the laptop that came with McAfee pre-installed, which, like I mentioned in the previous category, is quite an invasive and virile bit of bloatware. So minus 10 for it there, and an easy win for the Alienware. I'm going to be nice to the Alienware considering the vicious savaging that it got in the previous category and award it 10 points. Now, in order to test portability, a category that I 100% did not add entirely out of spite for the Alienware system, I'm gonna see how easily the device fits into this backpack. Okay, let's start off with the ROG. Oh, there we go, nice and easy, almost like it was designed to fit in there. Although considering that this is definitely a consolation category, it's only gonna have 0.25 added to its score. Next, let's see how the Alienware fares. Ugh. Okay, that doesn't seem to work. Although, luckily, the bag does have a different compartment which it may fit in. Okay, let's see if it'll fit in now. Ugh. I don't think it's worked. Minus 2? Now, this category is, in my opinion, in 2022, the main advantage that gaming desktops have over gaming laptops. Even a comparatively quiet gaming laptop will still be much noisier in my experience than a comparatively noisy gaming desktop. And that's definitely the case here. The laptop is a bit more of a screamer than the Alienware. which means we have to award the Alienware system 2 points for thermals and noise, which it feels a bit gross to award an Alienware system points for its thermals and noise, but unfortunately, that's the reality of this comparison. When it comes to comparing two gaming systems, I feel like gaming performance is probably one of the most important categories. But before we get into actual performance figures, I just want to compare the system specs of these two systems because they're weirdly similar, and it's one of the main reasons why I actually ended up doing this video. Now, in terms of CPU, the Alienware system has an AMD Ryzen 5 5600X in it, whereas the Asus laptop has a Ryzen 5 5600H in it, which is basically just the laptop version of the CPU in the Alienware system. Now, another similarity is that both of these systems ship as standard with a frankly heinous single 8GB stick of RAM running at 3200 MHz. Now, funnily enough, in terms of storage, the laptop actually has a much bigger SSD in it. It comes with a 512GB NVMe drive, whereas the Alienware system comes with a 256GB one. And then the other major difference between these two systems is the GPU that's in there. The Alienware has an RX 5300 in it, whereas the little Asus Strix laptop has an RTX 3050 mobile variant in there, and it's actually the highest TDP version of the RTX 3050. So I think it's going to be a very interesting comparison in terms of gaming performance. Now, I am going to test the gaming performance in two different configurations. The first one is going to be the stock Asthmatic foot race, where I'm going to compare the two of them just as they came out of the box, and then I'm going to do a magic upgrade to them that's going to make them just way better, and then compare the upgraded configurations of both of these systems. Stock Asthmatic foot race didn't go very well for the little laptop. The only game where it performed better than the Alienware system was in Control for some reason. But now let's do Dawid's magic PC upgrade to see if the laptop can win back a little bit of honor here. Oh, that was also a bit of a bloodbath, wasn't it? Aside from two games, the stock configuration of the Alienware system quite significantly outperformed the upgraded version of the laptop. But these results are still very interesting to me because the two games where the laptop performed better were the only two games where we were getting 100% GPU utilization, which makes me think that 5600H does not compare very well to its desktop counterpart because it could barely keep up with that mobile RTX 3050. So I think this laptop with a faster CPU in it would be a much fairer comparison to this Alienware system. Having said all of that, considering the fact that the Alienware system handily clapped the laptop's cheeks in terms of gaming performance, I do have to award it a fair amount of points here. The laptop was significantly less expensive than the Alienware system, and, not only was it about $300 cheaper, it also comes with a display, a keyboard, a bigger SSD, and it's a more complete package than the Alienware system. And actually, for the price of the Alienware, you can buy a reasonably more powerful laptop than this one. So I think, considering the price difference, the little laptop did hold up very well, and this Alienware system is very expensive for what it is. So in terms of score, when it comes to price, I'm going to award the Asus Strix a couple of points because it was cheaper than the Alienware system, and I kind of feel bad for it that I had to. It's a bit of an unfair comparison in that regard. Which brings me to the most important part of this new format of Dawid's Deathmatch Arena of Death, and that is the numerical score so that you can get a non-sarcastic indication of which device was the winner. Now we're going to start off with the Alienware system, which it didn't do very well it got minus 160 out of 10. The whole Alma business did count quite heavily against it, but you know, a scoring system is a scoring system. My hands were tied. There's not a whole lot I could have done there. However, on the other hand, the little laptop got 1.25 out of 10, which is still not great. That's not quite a passing grade, but it is a higher number than the Alienware scored, so it is the winner. Congratulations, laptops everywhere. You won this highly impartial test. And yeah, that brings me to the end of the video. So thank you very much for watching. If you liked the video, like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this one. And until the next video, bye-bye.